Hello, everybody. My name is Patrick. Patrick Maravelias is my full name. My Instagram name is Blueberry Chem. This is episode 1 of a podcast that I am launching called Chem Trails. It's called Chem Trails because of my Instagram name and because of drugs, not because of actual chemtrails. So if you are a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, this is not necessarily the place for you, but we're happy you're here anyway. So, anyway, a little bit about myself before we get into the ethos of what this podcast will be. I am a journalist and a writer. I have spent many years of my life in and around different subsets of the drug culture. To go to the beginning, I worked in cannabis for a very long time on cannabis farms out in the Emerald Triangle where I live, which is in Northern California. For those who don't know, it's where all your weed comes from, or used to at least. I worked on cannabis farms. I washed hash. I grew for myself. I grew for other people. I've packaged. I've worked at dispensaries, legal farms, illegal farms, you name it. As such, I spent about 2.5 years contributing to the online portion of High Times magazine before their unfortunate demise. And that is not to say that they're still dead. They just had a rebirth under the leadership of Josh Kesselman, which seems cool. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, I contributed to High Times magazine, like I said, for about 2.5 years. I've covered everything that I could think of, but my favorite stories to cover were related to the international struggle in the drug war. And I did that because, I live in California. A lot of us over here seem to forget that drugs are still very illegal. Cannabis is still illegal in most of the world. And to me, the mission is to end the drug war for all drugs, and to shed light on how harmful it is, both in America and in other countries. So, for example, I covered, a veteran in Arizona who just did 2 years in prison because he was caught manufacturing DMT to treat his cluster headaches. I covered Afghanistan poppy production when it experienced over a 90% decline in production when the Taliban took back over, which affected the worldwide heroin supply and probably in a way, or at least partially, gave way to the rise of fentanyl. Covered Singapore hanging suspected drug dealers or suspected drug users. So I've tried in my capacity as a journalist to cover that kind of stuff as much as I can. I had to cover I didn't have to. I chose to cover a lot of cannabis culture related things too, because it's a part of me. It's a part of my life. But my favorite stories were always, how is the drug war affecting people outside of this little bubble we live in California, where you can pretty much do whatever you want, with some limitations. But point being, people don't really go to prison here for nonviolent drug offenses anymore. Hell, I live in Humboldt County, where in Arcata, shrooms are decriminalized. All plant-based entheogens and psychedelics are decriminalized. And pretty much in the entire state, it depends on the county that you're in, but in most of the major cities and populated areas, you can pretty much get away with any form of possession you want. Most cops don't really care about low-level dealing unless it's coke, fentanyl, and even then your penalties are peanuts compared to other parts of the world. So that's part of the reason I wanted to start this, is I think that a lot of the people in my circle forget that that penalties are still super high for all drugs, but including cannabis in certain parts of the world. I mean, I remember it was during Spanibus, I want to say last year, maybe the year before. Spanibus is a big gathering of cannabis people in Spain. And a lot of California growers and producers and brands go out there every year to participate. There was a journalist, I forget her name. I don't want to put her on blast anyway. That's not to like this. I'm not bringing this up to be a dick. She got arrested with cannabis going through, I forget which country. I want to say Germany. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The point is, when she was flying home, she had to get a connecting flight, and she had cannabis with her, and she almost ended up going to prison for it. She ended up coming home, so it was fine. But then she wrote a piece about like, I've flown all over the world with cannabis. It's never been a problem. I've flown to Dubai, and she named a few other super illegal countries, which was crazy to me. I'm like, yeah, I support your right to do that, but they don't. Like, you could have very easily done a lot of time in prison in a foreign country for just being careless. And this isn't to be a dick to that journalist or put her on blast or to any of that. It's to point out that we live in a bubble out here where you can hop on an airplane in pretty much any California airport, and no one is really going to even look for weed or give a shit if you have it. They might make you throw it away, worst case scenario, if they find it. But we forget that not everywhere is like that. In fact, almost nowhere. Excuse me. Almost nowhere is like that. It saddens me that that's the case. And part of the ethos of this podcast, this project that I'm embarking on, is just to have discussions specifically about the drug war, which I believe to be one of the most destructive, unnecessary, and useless facets of life, both in America and worldwide. I think it was started, you could go back, you could blame Nixon, you can blame Reagan, you can blame Nancy Reagan, and I do. I blame all those people. But you can also blame Leary. You can also blame William Randolph Hearst, who ran smear campaigns against cannabis because he wanted to protect his interests in the timber industry. It's a cascading series of dominoes that has led us to this place, but we've continued to double down on a series of bad decision after bad decision that has led us to a place where our streets are riddled with homeless. Most of them are addicted to drugs. Most of them are mentally unwell, either because it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. It's like either they were already prone to mental illness and the drugs made it worse, or the drugs caused it outright. We have so many issues in this country and worldwide, and I'm not king of the world. I can't solve all of them in one fell swoop, nor do I think I have the knowledge or the wherewithal to do that. However, I do believe that the biggest intentional step we can take to drastically improve the quality of life for everybody would be to make every single psychoactive substance available for purchase, and that's something that would inevitably make things worse before they got better. However, I believe if we set things up a very intentional way, we can mitigate those harms, and we can certainly mitigate the harms that we already have. And there's a lot that goes into this, which is why it's going to be a podcast and why I'm going to bring a lot of people on who are smarter than me to discuss how they feel about it and what they think the best way to go about things is. It's a complex issue because it's not just the 12 or so drugs that are most common that we know about, like heroin, cocaine, meth, MDMA, acid. Like, everyone kind of can name the main the main list of things that people use, but that list is hundreds of thousands of chemicals long. It includes things that we can't possibly get rid of if we tried, like plants that grow wild. There's, again, like I don't mean to get too deep in the weeds here, but the point is that the word drugs is so much bigger than just the ones we're most familiar with. I mean, hell, I wrote a piece for High Times. It was my second piece for High Times ever about research chemicals, um, which have deeply affected the lives of people I know, including myself, because the way those work is the FDA and the DEA will schedule. Maybe I don't know if the FDA actually is involved in scheduling, so forgive me. But regardless, the DEA will schedule drugs, making them illegal. We have Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, and so on. Um, Everything that's not on that list is technically legal to purchase and distribute. So nefarious, or I don't even want to say nefarious. There are some nefarious chemists, but a lot of them are just regular chemists, um, synthesizing new and novel chemicals every year. And you can freely purchase these. And a lot of them are, I'm not a chemist, so forgive me, but a lot of them are just barely different than drugs that people knowingly consume and abuse. And that's also kind of the point, right? Like they sell you things that are just close enough to something you're familiar with, but that small difference can have drastic consequences. Like I had an ex-girlfriend who ordered, she was using benzodiazepines at the time, and she ran out and didn't want to withdraw, so she ordered clonazepam, which is, so Klonopin, which is commonly prescribed to people, is clonazepam. She ordered clonazepam, either not knowing the difference or not caring, and got sent these 2 little liquid vials of clonazepam, which most people in the throes of drug use and addiction wouldn't really think twice about that. But that small difference, that 1-letter difference in that chemical, she put 1 drop of this stuff on her tongue and she was in and out of consciousness for a week. Whereas the Klonopin, you're just kind of, relax for a few hours. But point being, there's thousands of these chemicals that people can just purchase with their debit card and order to their door without any legal interference. So it's becomes a much more complex issue, but it also illustrates how silly it is to play this game of whack-a-mole with prohibiting certain drugs just because people know what they are, when there's far more sinister and dangerous shit out there, rather than focusing on education, safety, and harm reduction. We focus on, like I said, whack-a-mole. We're trying to bail water out of the boat faster than it's coming in, instead of just fixing the hole in the damn boat. So I fully believe that if we were to legalize every drug tomorrow under certain conditions, right? And this is where I don't know everything. I don't have a perfect solution, because I also don't want American capitalism to just come in and start branding and selling shit. I mean, it's already happening on that same token. Like if you go to the Champs trade show in Vegas, it's a smorgasbord of research chemicals. A lot of them being sold as shrooms, and they're fully not, or like they're being sold as other things when they're just different chemicals that aren't technically illegal yet, and they're being branded in ways that are frankly disgusting. Right, but it would not be that disgusting to me if there were at least proper education around it. I think everyone has the right to experiment with their own consciousness as they see fit. However, when you sell these smoke shop remedies to people without telling them what's actually in what you're taking, you're putting a lot of people in harm's way. And we see it time and time again. If you go into a smoke shop anywhere in America, frankly, it doesn't matter what fucking state at the moment, or it kind of does, but mostly it doesn't. Like all these hemp-derived cannabinoids that are coming out, Delta 8 THC, HHC, like Delta whatever. These are all derivatives from the hemp plant, but a lot of them are concentrated in ways that people don't take naturally. And most people don't know what they are. They're just buying it because they think, oh, my smoke shop sells weed. Or, I don't know why, people take it for different reasons, but it's a much more complicated thing. Like, I mean, I've interviewed some of these hemp producers that explain to me like, oh, well, Delta 8 is just a derivative of CBD, and then we, you know, I don't remember the terms. Again, I'm not a chemist, but then we do such and such to it, and then it becomes this, and then, but by the time you get a few chemical alterations down the line, it's something that doesn't even occur naturally, which isn't to say people shouldn't be able to take it. Like I said, people should be able to take whatever they want, but they need to know what they're taking. And that to me isn't possible under the current system. I mean, hell, I went into a shroom shop in Venice Beach in Los Angeles with some other drug reporters and brand owners, people who know what they're talking about. And it was just I forget what the name of the shop was, but it was a big mushroom on the front, and it said like shroom shop or some shit like that. So we go in there, and there's a million different flashy bags all over the shelves. And at first I was like, wow, they're being pretty bold just selling shrooms out in the open. But then the more I talk to the person at the front, I was like, oh, nothing in here is a psilocybin mushroom. Not one thing. These are all research chemicals. And I think there maybe were a few bags in there that were actual psilocybin, but they were branded differently, or branded a certain way so that it didn't scream, hey, this is an illegal mushroom product, to the consumer, which is deeply unsafe to me. And I was with the owner of a mushroom brand there who was like talking to them about it, and we were all very confused. We were like, this is a new thing that as drug reporters we should be able to, or as drug reporters, drug people, and brand owners of people who sell these things, we should be able to very quickly identify and find out what's going on. But we are and the fact that I couldn't, and most of the people I was with weren't really clocking what was going on until we like kind of debriefed and talked about it later. We're in a much better position to know what's going on than most people. We do this shit for a living. I study this shit for a living, or I report on it at the very least. And these little pop-ups, these loopholes, I mean, they're popping up more and more. And if I don't fucking know what's going on, I can only imagine the average consumer has no idea which way is up or down. So that to me is a deeply dangerous thing that's only going to get worse. Because when I was growing up, no one knew what research chems even were. Me and my friends bought them because we wanted to take drugs. We kind of understood what was going on, but we also had no idea how much of a game of guinea pig we were really playing. Until a couple years down the line when we started reaping some of the consequences of that. Some of the fake benzos and stuff that we were taking, some of the Coke-like products we were taking. I mean, it was all just not to say any of it was inherently more dangerous than most drugs. Like, we kind of had an idea of where to start, but again, like, we were more well versed than most people. So if a random person were to stumble upon this website, order some of these chemicals, excuse me, and just start dosing themselves, I mean, they're putting themselves in a seriously dangerous position. And the answer to that is not, let's ban everything we don't know everything about, because that makes research infinitely harder, and it makes prohibition infinitely more harmful. The answer to that is, we have to make everything legal to sell, purchase, and consume, and pump as much taxpayer money as we can into rehabs, and really hammer on public education of drugs, because it's one of the most misunderstood and harmful issues plaguing us as a society today. That is not to say we should just freely be taking them either. I mean, that's a different conversation. I just think people have the right to take whatever they want as long as they're a consenting adult. And this is coming from someone who is almost 2 years sober off of everything. I mean, I've struggled with addiction myself. I see how harmful it is. I've been in rehab, recovery, different recovery related groups. I see how many people die, or never come back. I see how many people relapse after years and years and years of being sober and just go right back out, live on the streets, die, or end up in jail or what have you. Um, I have very firsthand experience with all of this, and I've lost a lot of friends to overdose. A lot of really good people, or just dying of alcoholism or whatever. So it's not to say that this is an issue that can be treated lightly in terms of just like, oh, just legalize it and all this will go away. It won't, but we can seriously mitigate the harms that come about as a result of a complete misunderstanding and miscarriage of justice that happened but mostly because Nixon wanted to distract from his failures in the Vietnam War. He wanted to lock up all the protesters who were detracting from him, and we continued to double down on those bad decisions year after year, while the list of drugs we had to contend with grew infinitely longer, and deaths because of this infinitely, exponentially expanded. And it became this thing of like, that generation had to watch their friends go off and die in the Vietnam War. Our generation has to watch our friends die of fentanyl overdose. And not to say those are the same thing, it's just we have gotten nowhere since that happened. Prohibition has not worked. It will not work. It never will. So that's my little platform. That's what this is about. That's what this project is about, is debating the logistics of that, the validity of that, and just really trying to shed some light on what drugs are, what they can do, and educated people's opinions on how we best approach the drug issue. I have a lot of friends in the space, very smart people who I will be bringing on to contribute to that, tell their own stories, and provide their perspective on these things. We're gonna kind of figure it out as we go along. I'm not much of a personality by any means, but this seems to be the way people like to consume information. I do too. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I've always considered myself more of a writer than a speaker. So this is going to be a fun learning experience for everyone involved for the most part. But I do think it's a very worthwhile thing to do. I think it's important. And I think it also complements my written work as well. I think it all should be consumed together, not just mine, but all the very smart people covering drugs and drug policy in the space today. I kind of got sidetracked by all that, but to shed a little more light on the work that I do, I no longer contribute to High Times ever since they went into receivership. I'm in talks with the new editor over there, and I might end up doing something for them again. I'm not sure, but anyway, my current work mostly is being published in Double Blind magazine, which is more psychedelic focused. I run a column for them called Please Trip Responsibly, all about how we can all, drug people have a problem behaving themselves, and I love them for it. But this is a very precarious time in terms of the push for decriminalization or legalization of any kind, and there's a lot of bad behavior, both in cannabis and in psychedelics, where I think people need to be given a bit of a talking to sometimes. So that's what those columns are focused on, and they're fun and lighthearted, and I enjoy doing them. And thank you to Mary Carrion for putting up with me and letting me run those columns. They're very fun for me. One of them was about learning lessons from what the push for legal cannabis did wrong, One of them was about what you can do as an individual to, you know, promote the movement in the proper way. And I have some upcoming ones about psychedelics in addiction treatment and why, frankly, we don't know enough to say they treat addiction at all. And that's a bit of a overgeneralized statement. Ibogaine shows a lot of promise in treating heroin addiction, but there's a lot of people in the space pushing the idea that, you know, you can just take these drugs to get off of other drugs and life will be hunky-dory, and I don't really buy into that. But, you know, that's my opinion. It's the whole purpose of the column is to open those conversations. And I have another one coming out about black market vendors and how they can operate a little smarter to not detract from the movement as a whole. You know, I fully believe in the movement as a whole. Psychedelics did a lot for me. Cannabis did a lot for me. Every drug I've ever taken has done a lot for me. And that's kind of another point that I want to drive home with this whole project is it's not just limited to the shit that hippies like. And I don't think we need a medical defense for taking any drug at all. I don't think people need a defense to do cocaine or heroin or fentanyl or any of it. I just think that we should make it as easy as possible for them to do it safely, for them to understand what they're taking, for them to understand the harms of what they're taking before they take it. I think it should be fucking cheap also. I think if drugs weren't expensive, a lot of people wouldn't be homeless. And I think if it were all lab tested and people were taking clean shit, then a lot of the harms we see, a lot of the health issues that we see wouldn't be nearly as much of a thing. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't see these people with their teeth rotting out and this and that. I mean, maybe to some degree you would, but a lot less than you currently do. You know, we have streets full of zombies, and I feel for each and every one of them. You know, and many of them are way too far gone to ever help. But I believe we can prevent more people from becoming that way. And I think that starts with proper education, really funding addiction research, because we don't know shit about addiction. We don't know what causes it. We don't know how to treat it. We don't know anything about it, really. And, you know, I just spoke to a friend. He works for a startup that makes like a headband that reads brainwaves or some such like that. And he was explaining that there are studies going on about like activating a certain nerve in the face when someone sees a drug trigger that drastically reduces relapse and reoccurrence of use. And it was very interesting. But point being, you know, that's just a one-off study. We really don't know anything about addiction yet, how to treat it, where it comes from. We don't know if it's genetic or if it's we don't know like anything. You know, I could go on and on, but we don't know anything. And I think it's very important for us to pour a lot of funds into researching that, which we currently don't. The number of federal grants given to addiction studies is very, very small, percentage-wise, compared to everything else. I think we need to put more money into rehab. I also don't really think rehab works, but I think if we were to research things a bit better and learn how to run better rehabs, maybe that wouldn't be the case. And like I said, I think this thing should be cheap. I think we single-handedly created organized crime when we started the drug war. And it was around before, but it would be peanuts compared to what it is now if we didn't create such a colossal market for illegal drugs in this country. I mean, Jesus, you look back at the American demand for cocaine and how it fully funded, I could go on and on. Between cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl, we have handed trillions of dollars to these organized crime groups. And if we want them to go away, we take their money. They have more money than God right now. And if we could take away that source of income, and also redirect our law enforcement from spending egregious amounts of money and time on, meaningless drug arrests that do nothing to the overall supply chain. Maybe they could actually go about solving crimes that actually harm people. They could focus on gun running or human trafficking or rape or murder or any of the things that just get lost in the pile of drug arrests that they have to make. And I'm vastly oversimplifying things, but point being, if you make drugs legal and you provide companies a safe and profitable avenue to selling them, making sure they're clean, and getting them to people alongside proper education about what they're taking. And I do think you would have to cap how much profit you can make off of something, because again, the point here is that they need to be cheap. Cheap, accessible, clean, safe. And that's why what we saw in Oregon didn't work. They just decriminalized drugs. They didn't provide safe access to them, which just made it so that, people felt safe doing drugs there, so they continued to do them. They continued to do the same dirty, shitty drugs. Dirty, shitty, and expensive, mind you. And nothing got solved. It only got worse. But again, I don't think that's the proper way to do things, So that's where I stand on the issue. That's where I try to center my work around, and that's what this podcast will be about. Like I said, I got a really good group of friends who are going to be happy to come talk about this, and I'm really looking forward to opening up those conversations with people. And if this goes nowhere, then great, whatever. But I hope people find value in it, and I hope, extremely idealistically, that maybe some actual change comes about as a result of it. And to shamelessly plug my own work, just in case anyone who ends up watching this episode isn't aware, I do have a book coming out soon. It's a novel. It's called Indigo Henry. It's about two brothers, one of whom is fresh out of rehab, going on running around the Emerald Triangle looking for a lost gold rush stash. A lot of it's based on stories from my own life. I never actually went looking for any lost gold rush stash, but a lot of the stories interwoven into the novel are very true. That was supposed to come out November 7th. I'm still pushing for that. Formatting and designing a book is much harder than I thought, so it might get pushed back a little bit, but I'm hoping not. Either way, it's coming out real soon. And you can always catch up with me on my Instagram, Blueberry Chem. You can follow my work at Double Blind Magazine. And you can also go find all the work I did for High Times. It's hundreds of articles, many of which are very silly and just ridiculous. Like, I covered a Russian company that'll bury you alive for $60,000 in the name of therapy. They'll let you go, obviously, but they do bury you alive. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the point is, there's also a lot of very serious articles in there. My favorites are the Weirdos pieces, which is the brainchild of their old VP of content, John Capetta. And that was kind of everyone's chance to write columns for them. So anyway, I hear my kids yelling at me to let them up from their nap. And I think that was a pretty solid introduction to what this is going to be. So I love you all. I hope you find value in the work that I'm going to be bringing to you. Yeah. Hope you follow along. See you all soon.